What's up, Internet? You're to episode 114 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete Messi, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. Oh, we got a juicy one today. I wouldn't, it'll be a good episode, but it's not a good week in news.
Really fun week. It's Halloween. We're going to be talking about horror games. And that's why it's not fun, right? Because they're scary and you don't like them. That's what
Sure,
you're talking
sure.
about?
No, it's real life horror that's messing with us today.
Oh,
The evils of
okay.
capitalism and
That
stuff
is
that's
the scariest story of them all.
yeah, the real ghouls out there,
But yeah,
executives.
the real goal is that you have 1 day of healthcare. That's the real goal.
Yeah, so let's not bury the lead here, right? Bungie is the latest PlayStation studio to get hit with a big round of cuts, and we have another unfortunate round of layoffs in 2023. So the story
Yeah.
broke yesterday, as of this recording. Jason Schreier over at Bloomberg tweeted that Bungie laid off an undisclosed number of staff today, part of ongoing job cuts across PlayStation. The company recently delayed the upcoming Destiny 2 expansion, The Final Shape, to June 2024, and the new game Marathon to 2025, sources tell Bloomberg. So before we get into the updates to the story today, what was your initial reaction to this news, Steve?
I think I was quite surprised because it comes along with a delay. Like we knew they were working on a big expansion, which was due to hit this year. It's been pushed back now to June 2024, alongside Marathon, which is the big first project that is coming out of Bungie since the Sony acquisition 15 months ago. And I was surprised that Bungie was being hit by layoffs as well. I guess in hindsight, it probably shouldn't have been because all of the other Sony studios seemingly are being hit by layoffs, and the big project they were assisting Naughty Dog with has been cancelled, seemingly. So I guess everyone needs to say that all these studios, I guess, are saving money from the top down, from the Sony executives down. At least seemingly that's what most people are assuming, right? That this is coming from the top.
Right, and I think reasonable assumption to be made, right? When you consider the fact that we've seen a bunch of layoffs this year, right? Most of Sony studios have been hit in some capacity. Maybe most isn't fair to say, but several. And we saw the closing of like Pixel Opus, right? And the studio behind Concrete Genie. Obviously, there's the all the stuff we talked about, with Naughty Dog, and it's been an ongoing issue. So to see that Bungie is not immune to that is not necessarily surprising. But I do think that me among them, right? There were some folks kind of scratching their heads where it's like it's very strange to see you, at least you and I share this opinion, overpay for a studio in Bungie and hang your hat on the idea that you're hiring them for their talent and then lay a bunch of people off and delay their projects. Is
Do you think that shows a shift away from games as a service then on the Sony side, that we've seen the abandonment of Naughty Dog's multiplayer? I mean, they've not formally cancelled it, but it seems to be indefinitely delayed. That we're not going to get that
certainly
Last
in
of Us
trouble, right?
Factions multiplayer. Yeah, there's in trouble. We had the reports that Bungie looked at it and was just like, "This game's not fun. The hook's not there. There's no kind of real reason to keep playing this." Do you think that we're gonna see fewer and fewer of these games coming out, being released, the games that we have kind of expected? I think it was 7 games that they'd planned to release by 2025.
I do. I don't necessarily think that this round of layoffs is related to that specifically, right? And we'll talk more about that because we do have some updates to the story today. But I do think that that's what's going to happen because I've been banging this drum for a long time, man. That like we are not entering a time when companies are going to be wanting to take big swings and take risks and investing a ton of money into a style of game that, whether it's because the trend is ending and the interest in those kinds of games is waning overall, or it's financial pressure, due to the ongoing recession and inflation and all those, market issues that could also be impacting players' behaviors and their willingness to spend money on a free game. Um, However you slice it, I think it's clear that right now it is risky to be in the games as a service business. And, I don't think that they're laying all these people off because they're like, oh, we got to pivot, right? That's what Bungie does. I don't think Bungie's going to stop doing that necessarily. But I do think that there's probably going to be some hesitance from PlayStation to, greenlight a project like that at a studio like Naughty Dog, right? And maybe that Horizon project that we talked about that we saw, allegedly we saw leaked screenshots of, right? Maybe that game gets canceled and doesn't come out, right? I wouldn't be surprised if any of that comes to pass because, based on what we know, these games have been in gestation for a while. They're not really coming together. And it's not clear that there's a market for them when they come out. And why would you continue to bullheadedly invest money in that when you see your competitors pulling out and getting gun shy about it, right? Like, I
Well, and
get,
having real successes with single player games, like Starfield seems to have been successful. Tears of
sure.
the Kingdom was obviously really successful. Even
Well,
people like EA are having great successes
they
with
just
stuff
released
like the
Spider
Star
Man.
Wars games.
Right? And like
Yeah.
that is doing really well. And it's like, wouldn't you rather, and, uh, you know, this is just one man's opinion, but wouldn't you rather take that money and be like, what if Insomniac opens another arm and they start making more games than they already do? Right? Like,
Or what if Insomniac opens up a games as a service arm and all of these characters that are going to be part of the same universe, like
I
Spider-Man and
don't, because
Wolverine, they're
who
seemingly
wants that
taking
game,
place in the
Steve?
same universe?
Nobody
I don't
wants
know.
it. Nobody wants that game. Look at the reaction to Avengers.
But would you want a good version of that game?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't play a good version of it. Those games are not fun. Like, I'm sorry, I don't like them. And like they are, I'm exaggerating, but like not every player wants that kind of game. And I think
Mhm.
there are a lot of IP that don't lend themselves to it. I
And
think
playing
shooters,
devil's advocate though, I do think though that Sony was missing this as part of their pillars of
their
their
portfolio.
business, right? It wasn't in there. They had a mobile play, like they've bought some studios, which they've closed down now. Seemingly they're pulling out on mobile. They're not really bothered about it anymore. And they had the single player stuff now down, but they never really got into the multiplayer side of things, which Xbox has had. Like Halo was very successful for them. They've got
Yeah, but
multiplayer
like,
stuff.
how successful was it? Right? Like it's like,
Not as successful as like something like Destiny, but to buy someone like Destiny, and the plan, if you remember, as part of the Sony investor relations stuff that came out, they were planning to open a live service center of excellence with
right.
Bungie as like a joint thing, and then all of the studios working on live service games would go through that that live service center of excellence to kind of get reviewed, and it'd be tasked with
You think any of
important
that's still happening?
aspects of it. No,
I
I
don't.
think that's being closed, and I think that's probably having a knock-on effect with some of these layoffs.
Sure, maybe.
Do you think Jim Ryan leaving has any kind of effect here?
Yeah, definitely. I think that this was his initiative that was spearheaded, and I think we talked about it when he left of like, is he leaving on his own accord or is he being removed? And it's not clear, but I mean, with the idea that they are cleaning house at a lot of these studios and they are potentially moving away from some of these projects, or at least that's what you and I seem to think. Whether or not that comes to pass, we'll have to see. Of course, there's not evidence of that outright, right? Aside from Naughty Dog's project.
I mean,
Um,
which ones have they released though? Like we know about some of them because they've been announced.
sure.
Jade Raymond's game is going to be one of them that's coming to PC. It was that like heisty looking one.
Hmm.
Then there's Helldivers 2, which is being released on PC and on PlayStation day and date.
Hmm.
So some of them are probably in the pipeline. I would imagine MLB The Show, they consider that a live service
Yeah,
game
for
because you
sure.
continue to buy things with it. And they've obviously got Destiny and the ongoing expansions and Marathon and
And I
things
think
like
all
that. They
those games
probably
will come
count all
out,
those.
right? Like, I
Yeah.
think that there will be live service games that come from PlayStation, but the idea that they're going to invest billions of dollars into this and have this service and have it be a major part of their business moving forward, I just don't think that that's going to work. And I think that they see that it's not going to work. And I think that rather than doing what they did with PSVR 2 and believing in the sunk cost fallacy, I think that they're going to I think they're trying to pull up the plane and be like, never mind, this was a mistake, and we need to pivot before we invest more money here because it's not gonna work. It's not working.
What happens to those teams then? Are we gonna see more layoffs in
Definitely.
the kind of ongoing future?
I mean, it depends, right? Like, I think the studios that have already had layoffs, I don't know that we'll see more layoffs there. I think the people that are left will probably either graduate onto other projects or whatever, right? And they'll get moved around. And who got laid off is the folks that they felt were, you know, the weight, like the mass bulk of the expenditure that was being invested in that project was cutting
Yeah.
most of the team, right? So it's like, yeah, they might still be futzing around with it and seeing what happens, but that's the kind of thing where they would have to ramp a team back up and they would have to invest more money in it. And I don't know that they're going to do that, right? And I would be far less surprised to see them quietly cancel some of these projects and lay a bunch more people off and then take some of the leads on those projects and be like, okay, great, let's have you pivot to a more traditional single player experience or whatever, right? And again, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more. You and I've been saying this for years, and I'm surprised we haven't to see more stuff like Miles Morales or more stuff like Uncharted Lost Legacy, where it's like
They
you
they
can.
kinda started that trend with
They
Uncharted
did,
Lost Legacy, it was great.
and Miles was a big success too, right? And it's like the idea that they could sell those games that are a little cheaper and a little cheaper to produce, and are like uh there's something I really want to talk to you
It
about.
replaces the need for DLC.
I'll say this. Well, it doesn't even though, right? Spider-Man had its cake and ate it too, and I think you could do both.
Yeah, true.
And I think looking at Spider-Man 2 without getting into spoilers,
I
there
guess I mean the financial need for DLC,
sure,
like,
sure.
you don't have to eh, rely on the DLC when you've got another game that you
And
can
like
make out the same
people are
amount.
more likely to play a new game than to buy DLC and play it. We know that. Um, but in Spider-Man 2, I think that they easily set up enough content for a sequel, DLC, and a spin-off game. So like, will we see all that come to pass? Probably not, but maybe. And like maybe that's the way that you make this development more profitable and like, the ability for them to get bigger returns is to do things like the Last of Us Part 1 and like having a team that's working on a remake and a team that's working on a spinoff and the team that's working on the next big sequel and try to get more out of an engine and more out of a team and do stuff like that, Um I do think that that's going to be the direction that they probably decide to pivot into because it's what works and it's what's been it's what works for them, I should say. It's been their proven path to success and it's been the experiments into things like mobile and this that have been big investments without big returns. And I could definitely see them double down on like putting games on PC because that's been successful. And like this is a way for us to monetize these games further. We have all these games in our back catalog. Let's start putting, PS3 games on PC. Let's start
Well,
putting
you've got
PS4
2
games.
studios that can do that, right? They work with
Yeah,
Iron Galaxy and they bought Nixies. So
right.
you should be able to pump out a few games. And Nixies have shown, working with Insomniac, how quickly they can get games out. We've had 3
Totally.
Insomniac games come to PC already now, and those are the 3 games that came to PS5. They've just put out their 4th game on PS5. It's insane the kind of amount that studio can put out in such a short space of time.
And there's plenty of high quality games that like they've not leveraged yet. Like Ghost of Tsushima has not come to PC. I would love to see that on Steam, right? Like, you have like Ratchet and Clank 2016
Bloodborne.
is a game that they could port. Bloodborne is a game that would have a massive PC release. Those are all things that you would hope that, are in the cards long term. And I think that those kinds of things and again, right? Like I wouldn't be surprised if they licensed more TV shows because The Last of Us was successful and it seems like Twisted Metal did okay, and, like,
Was that
I
out? I didn't even know that had to come
yeah, it's
out.
on Peacock, it's like,
Oh, that's why I don't know, because we don't have that here.
it didn't set the world on fire or anything, but I think it did okay, and, like, I'm sure it made enough to be, a tidy little profit for them. Um, so, like, I think when you start looking at those things, I think those are safer choices, right? They're more conventional choices. They're more conservative choices because it's just doubling down on the thing that you already know that works for you rather than like trying to reinvent the brand. And I think at a time where you're cutting costs and you're laying people off and you're trying to like batten down and get ready to weather the storm that's coming, or that you think is coming, I don't think that you take big swings like that, and I think you do try to, um, make safe, strategic moves that speak to the audience that you've cultivated.
Which is what AAA actually means, Pete. It's, safe and secure, it's like
Yeah.
AAA credit rating, it's stuff that they know will sell, and I don't think that live service is that. I don't think you can get a real good footing unless you are 100% sure and you've got the backing already. If Destiny 3 comes out, I'm sure there'll be a phenomenal success for them because they've got all of the players of Destiny 2. They sell them Destiny 3, everyone moves over. They continue to play the game that they've been playing for years.
I think, like, I think especially when you think about I I think making it with a live service game is like making it in the music industry or something. It's like you gotta just be lucky and, like, have the right idea at the right time and strike gold and then continue to strike gold forever, right? Like, that's the model, and, like, that's not sustainable. Whereas, like, to your point, AAA is sustainable, and it's like when you do it right, it's very predictable, you know? Like, we knew Spider-Man
Well,
was gonna
every Ubisoft game is exactly the same,
Sure.
but with a different skin on it, and they sell every single time.
And granted, right? There's volatility there, but I think when you look at a lot of the companies that struggle, it's because the quality dropped off. And it's like I look at games like Final Fantasy 16 earlier this year. That was a high quality single player, cinematic type experience, and it did really well. And Spider-Man just did really well. And we knew that Spider-Man was going to do well to the point where people were like talking shit about it as like, it's going to just be more Spider-Man. It's going to be more of a game of the year contender, right? Like, okay. And like, what happens when they do that with Wolverine? And it's like, oh, wow. So this is a repeatable model where we take a recognizable character and make a game that, speaks to that existing fan base. And it's also just a good enough action game that casuals can jump in and enjoy it and feel like they're part of it. That's a winning formula, my guy. And I wouldn't be surprised if Spider-Man, has done really well, if Wolverine does really well, who's to say Marvel isn't like, "Hey, you wanna who else you wanna work on?" Right? And they make another
No, I
Marvel
don't think
game.
Marvel care as long as they keep getting their check in the post, like,
Yeah.
they'll license their characters out to
A
anyone.
and it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw them do that with other IP, right? And it's like, we know that, like, James Bond is coming from, IO. We know that, we've got, Indiana Jones from the Wolfenstein team, and, like, when you I think that that's a far safer path forward is to make actually good licensed games is, like, a super easy way to make something that is predictably going to sell a lot of copies. And they've shown that it's an easy repeatable formula with Spider-Man, and if you just take that same thing and put it in, and not the exact same thing, right? But like, okay, well, what if we made the Wolverine
I'm
game
sure
and then
Wolverine's gonna be different, right? There's gonna you like
absolutely.
different doing different things, but it's gonna be follow similar formula. You're doing quests, it's a narrative-driven
And it's gonna
game.
have a good story, and it'll be somewhat
Mhm.
emotional, and it'll have good tight action, and it'll be somewhat check boxy. Like, yeah, and it's gonna be a very different experience, I'm sure, in the same way that Ratchet and Clank is very different than Spider-Man, but it is still that same, like, it's like 20 to 30 hours. There's a story, there's side quests, there's cameos from other X-Men, there's this, there's that. Like, and they've confirmed that this takes place in the same universe as Spider-Man.
Mhm.
Like, this is their Marvel universe. So the idea that like they could make an Avengers game eventually, they could make a big X-Men team up game. Like, those are things that would bring butts to seats. And, I think will again predictably sell very well, and then predictably sell very well when they come to PC and on and on, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if those are the types of decisions we see them start making because it's just like, how can we repeat the successes that we've already had? Like, you see companies do that all the time, right? How do we cash in on
But
what we
at
know
what
works?
point, though, do you worry that it becomes stale? And I'm sure this was part of their fear internally, right? It's like
Totally.
we see all of these live service games like Call of Duty, which has just been bought by Microsoft, and there's Fortnite, and all of these games that on our platform we know are the biggest money makers. It's the Call of Duties, the Fortnites, the FIFAs,
Yeah,
the Maddens. They're the ones making the cash.
totally.
And they're probably like, well, we want a slice of that cash. So how do we do it? We need to make a free to play game or a game that's a live service game. And they've probably looked at that and gone, this is the right strategy
I
for
think
us
that's
from
the
a
thing though,
business
man.
perspective.
The how do we do it is a very expensive question to
Well,
ask.
how do we do it? We spend 3.9 million or whatever it was on Bungie.
And then commit to spend another couple billion on development and R&D, and it's just like, dude, that's a lot of money in the hole. If this doesn't work out, you bet the whole farm on this. And guess
Yeah, it
what?
was a big risk,
There's a
and Jim
proven
Ryan's no longer there.
Yeah, there's a proven fucking track record of it being a big risk. And again, you don't need to look far. Look at Marvel's Avengers, for an example. No, Steve, people don't want that game, even if it's good. And that game had problems, whatever. But from the moment that
I
game
can
was announced,
imagine a multiplayer aspect within Spider-Man would be really fun, though.
but maybe, but I don't think that's what people want. And like, I think before Avengers, if, and don't get me wrong, if Avengers had come out and it kicked fucking ass, it would have succeeded, sure. But it didn't. And I think part of that is because we have not figured out a satisfying way to make a multiplayer games as a service like action brawler that's fun, right? Like there was that wrestling game that Epic just canned. Brawlhalla or no, that's not right. Is that right?
That's, Ubisoft's.
Yeah, that's a 2D one. Whatever. Somebody in the comments is screaming
Like
that
Rumble something.
Rumbleverse, right? That was the one.
Mm.
And that game, by all accounts, very fun. Wasn't enough to stick around. It got
Yeah, but,
canceled.
neither was Fall Guys, and we saw problems there, right? We've just had
Yep.
massive layoffs over at the
Like
Fall Guys studio,
that
and
game
it's
was
like
fun though, right? And it's like, and it still wasn't enough
it
to
was
survive.
fun, but it got stale. I'm running
Right.
forwards all the time, and we
But again,
never
it's so it's
really
like,
innovated and added anything new.
yeah, but it's like again, so what is the likelihood that they make a Spider-Man multiplayer game or something that's permanently fun forever? They probably
That's
don't.
the concern, is I don't know if you can. The reason Destiny succeeds with doing it is the story. It's people come back for the story, the characters, the fact that there's multiple classes and you can play multiple characters, and you wanna know the expansion.
It's
I
also
was actually really excited about the next expansion because Cade's back. He's
I
been
mean,
gone for a long time. We've got Nolan North voicing him now instead of, who's the guy that was Nathan Fallion. He's not there anymore. Nolan North's replaced him. It's like we swap over. And it was really cool to see him back, and I was really excited about that. And it's a shame that it's been
I mean,
delayed.
that's also a type of game that lends itself to that though, right? Like it's like we know that shooters work as a game as a service because that's the like shooters are a multiplayer first genre. And like there are single player FPS experiences, but they're few and far between compared to the number of multiplayer FPSs. And I think that's why you've seen success with game or third person too. Shooters. That's why you've seen success with Fortnite and with Call of Duty and with, these games that transition well to games as a service, right? But it's like I don't see PlayStation or any of these publishers putting out a game like this, making it available on all platforms and then supporting it the amount you need to for it to be successful, right? Something like Fortnite is successful because they have how many teams working on it, or not teams, how many people working on it non-stop. And it's also a commercial, right? Like that's a big
No, yeah,
way that it
that's
generates money.
they were the
You're
first
not
ones
going to
to do
do
it, and I
that.
feel like Bungie were the first ones to do the live service as we know it now. Fortnite kind
Totally.
of expanded upon that to make it into their own multiverse. And I think the reason Fortnite works is things that we've seen time and time again with live service game launches. They do not have an ongoing content strategy, which Fortnite does. Fortnite constantly knows what the next season is, and probably the season beyond that, and probably the season beyond that. And they have a pipeline of all of this content that's going into the game, what it's going to look like. And they also know that they've got the teams where if something comes up in the kind of zeitgeist that week, they can quickly add in a new dance, or they can quickly add in a new costume, and they can get that content added probably within days.
Yeah. And like you're not going to achieve that with other like you can't replicate the things that Fortnite does to make billions of dollars a year, right? And that's what these companies want. They want that. And that is extremely hard to manufacture, right? Like it's not something that I think you can just, be like, yeah, like let's just throw a bunch of time and money at Naughty Dog and they're going to make a Fortnite. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. And you run the risk of
What do you
ruining
think you need
ruining
then?
these
Because
studios in the process, right? Of
What
scaring off the talent that makes the games that people actually want from them. We've seen that time and time again too. It's like
what if it's not money, it's not time, and it's not talent, how do you make these games then? Is it just sheer luck? Because they bought Bungie, who were arguably the best in the business at making a live service game, the best in the business at gunplay. How do they then take that knowledge and success and kind of replicate it? Or
I
can you
mean,
not even do that?
I don't think you can. And I think that a lesson that the games industry would benefit greatly from is that trying to replicate success is a road to madness. Because at the end of the day, I don't think that Epic can even repeat what they did, right? They've bought these games like Fall Guys and Rumbleverse and tried to position them as pillars of their business that could, have even a fraction of the success that Fortnite has, and they have failed without exception, right? Aside from Rocket League, which was already a phenomenon when they bought it.
Yeah. I mean, they bought Harmonix and shut them down as well. They did that too. That was the thing, which was a real shame.
But point being, I don't think it's a thing you can plan. I think it's a thing that you
No.
need to bet the farm on getting it out, finishing it, and then it maintaining an audience. And that is not
But
easy
you
to
do
do.
need that content strategy because that was the problem with Halo Infinite. I feel like if Halo Infinite had had the content strategy in place, it probably would have captured a lot of people. It came out the same month as that awful
Yeah.
Battlefield release where everyone was just like, "This sucks. There's nothing here. Where do I go?" Oh, Halo Infinite's just released and it's coming to PC and it's on next gen consoles and it's got this really great new big map that you can play in. There was no seasonal content. They hadn't planned season 2. We never really got the next really big maps or modes for a year until a year's time, and it was just a real massive oversight and failing. And I feel like that's always the problem I see with live service games that fail. Multiverses came and went because I honestly don't even know what the story is there. It disappeared. It was apparently in early access and then closed. Like, what was that about? It's just like there's so many weird stories when it comes to live services.
I mean, dude, I think all you're doing is lining up more and more examples that prove to me that there's like two genres that work in this space, and it's shooters and it's card games. And like that's
Well,
it.
and sport games. Like FIFA does
Sure.
really, really well.
Yeah, but FIFA does really, really well. Right? Do any of the other sports games make the
I
money
guess
that FIFA
Madden
makes?
does. I don't
Does
know.
it though? I don't know that it does.
And I was gonna say, I guess Red Dead Redemption 2 or GTA does really well, but they are both shooters. Yeah, I think you're probably right. Shooters are the one, but shooters is probably the biggest
And then
genre of
again,
video
right?
game
Like
anyway.
arguably, but like is it the biggest genre because of that? Because I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know, dude. It's like it's that and it's like MMOs, right? And like those are not mainstream like that anymore. So I don't know. I think it is a losing battle to try and replicate success, especially when what you're trying to replicate is lightning in a bottle.
Yeah. Honestly, it's a real shame. My heart goes out to everyone affected at Bungie. Some of the people that got laid off, it's kind of beggars belief, really, with how long they've been there and the
Yeah.
jobs that they do, and seemingly how important they were
Yeah, so
at the company.
let's talk about some of the new details that came out today. Because Paul Tassi from Forbes has a report up on it and was tweeting about it and was dropping a bunch of information. Um, and yeah, man, I mean, it seems like it's pretty serious, a serious amount of people, right? So this is from Paul's tweet summary of the information before he wrote up an article about it. The layoff decisions came directly from Bungie management, not Sony. This is not about Sony replacing Bungie employees with their own people. Many employee benefits, though not health insurance, only last until the end of the month if you're let go. Laying people off on the 30th means a single additional day of coverage. So, like you said, these people are now without healthcare almost immediately, which is devastating, especially if you are somebody with like a serious condition or something like that.
Mm.
Um, He goes on to add, many employees had unvested shares as a result of the Sony purchase. These shares would be received based on staying with the company for a certain number of years following the sale. But those shares revert to Bungie if you leave, even if you're fired, which is what's happening now to many of those affected, which is just the fucking grossest thing, my man, that they're laying these people off with a day of health insurance so that they can save money on shares. Fuck that, dude. That is
Which is the
awful. That is awful.
the kind of which is I've seen people speak about this 1.2 billion retention, and then they had all this money set
Give that
aside,
context. Give
and
that context. So explain that.
so the as part of the deal, Bungie allocated 1.2 billion dollars of that money as part of this retention incentive plan. That incentive plan is what Paul's talking about here with the unvested shares. Those shares got allocated to employees as a way of kind of keeping them on the hook and staying at Bungie and continuing to work on the projects there rather than kind of leaving and going to work somewhere else, because Sony wanted to make sure that those people and the talent that they just acquired could help lead the way and help set up that center of excellence for live service games. And so now a lot of that stock, a lot of that $1.2 billion dollars that had been allocated is now available for Bungie to spend again because those shares revert back to Bungie.
Which is just insane. Like that is, and again, right, like you said, like some of the people affected by this, right? It includes Michael Salvatore, who's been a composer at Bungie since 1997, right? Like that is insane. Like that guy's a legend. That's the dude that, right? If I'm not mistaken, that's the guy that wrote ba 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 ba. Like, come on. You lay that guy
Yeah,
off? Insane.
yeah.
And he Paul reached out to him, and he wrote a letter that is really, it's sad to hear, man. He said, "Hi Paul, thanks for reaching out to me and for your kind words. The last 24 hours have been crazy and I'm still sorting through my feelings. Many of my good friends were also let go and I feel awful for them. My heart goes out to everyone who lost their job yesterday. Regarding myself, the overwhelming feeling I have is one of gratitude. Beginning in 1997, Bungie provided me with the opportunity to contribute music to some of the most amazing games ever made. I've been truly blessed to work with so many awesome creative people over the years. I've learned so much from them, not only as a composer, but as a human being during my time there. One of the things that I always loved about being a part of the team was our willingness to take risks, which has always been a part of Bungie's DNA. And when we would fail, we wouldn't retreat, we reload. That is at the heart of what kept me engaged year after year through success and failure. I truly wish the best for all my friends who are still there, and I have no doubt that they will be able to right the ship. To the fans, please don't hate on them. Give them a chance to blow you away like they've done so many times before. Peace to all, Mike." And I thought a nice note from Paul, or I'm sorry, from Mike, and uh, I'm sure he's gonna find work somewhere else. Like we said, the dude is a legend, and
At 343, hopefully.
that would be incredible, right? That would be pretty cool. But it it is so crazy to see somebody with that much legacy and that much talent and that much love for the company just be unceremoniously let go like that in the name of, you know, just saving a few
Probably a couple of
dollars.
$100,000. That's probably all
Yeah,
they saved.
like pennies, in the grand scheme of things, right? Versus the talent that you're losing there, which is irreplaceable. That is nuts, man. And obviously, like we said, Michael had been there since 1997. That's insane. But there are recent folks who were also in really serious roles that we've seen laid off, right? Like Liana Rupert, who was the community manager for Destiny 2 and the co-lead of accessibility at Bungie. Like that's a major role, right? And again, like she posted this thread that was like heartbreaking to read, man. Like I know that this was a dream job. When she got this job, I saw her post about it and she was like so excited to be a part of her favorite games team. And like, You just
She
see
did
this.
great. She highlighted great accessibility issues and failings in Cyberpunk. Remember when that came out when she was over at Game Informer, and then took that knowledge over to Bungie
Right.
to help them improve accessibility on Destiny 2, as well as working in the community management side of things. She's well loved by the community, so I imagine this is going to be a really hard loss for them.
And again, right, it's like, this is the person you're laying off, your community manager for your biggest game, like, that is a major role. That's like, what are you doing? You know? And again, right, like, to read this, like, her statement is, like, it's heartbreaking, man. She said, my heart is breaking for all affected. I'm now looking for opportunities. I have 21 years of games industry experience in media, production, and community management. I'm processing. I'm so heartbroken. I don't know what to do from here. This was my home. I feel so lost. With Chu, who is their partner, having been laid off earlier this year, I'm terrified we are also going to lose our house. More than that, I can't imagine not going into the studio on Fridays for hugs, goofing off with DPS, brainstorming with the raid team, accessibility. I just can't. Love to all. That's awful, man. Like, this is somebody with 2 decades of industry experience at their dream job, by all accounts,
Mhm.
beloved by the people that she was there to serve, and now she's laid off, lost, her health care, and could lose her home because they needed to save pennies on the dollar.
I really wonder what the financial situation is over there because something's got to be pretty dire. They've had to delay 2 games
It's
and then
almost
laying
like
off
PlayStation
really
overpaid
essential
for them, and
people.
that they were generally a disorganized company, and that they were floated by angel investors for almost the entirety of the time that they've been independent. Crazy, crazy to see that
Hmm.
played out that way when Xbox had a fucking graph of every conceivable company that they could acquire, and they were like, nah, like, and then Sony paid billions for them, billions more than they were worth for them. I don't think they were even worth $1 billion, if I'm honest. And and now we're losing some of the talent that they were so dead set on maintaining, right? Like, yeah, there'll be no consequences for laying off the community manager to your bread and butter game. There'll be no consequences for getting rid of the only composer that anybody has heard work at this. It's like, this is the identity of the studio, man. Like, what did you pay for?
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, though, it's not Sony that's doing this. As Paul said, it's coming from
You're right. It's
Bungie
coming from
and not
Bungie's
from
leadership.
Sony.
But it's like, that's even more unfathomable. It's such a disappointment, man. And again, right? Like, Nathan Grayson, over on Twitter, who's, I think he was also recently laid off, unfortunately. Who's an independent games reporter. He used to work at the Washington Post, before, that all got messed up. And he posted a screenshot from an article he wrote February 1st, 2022. Bungie leadership assures employees Sony deal will not result in layoffs or restructuring.
Which was part of the $1.2 billion package that
Right.
they spoke about. Seemingly, that wasn't worth the paper it was written on.
Insane. And again, to pull from more of Paul Tassi, he said, again, this is part of a wider excuse me, I'm gonna try that one again. Cost cutting at Sony in multiple areas, but as an independent entity, who gets cut, the timing and terms as above are Bungie's decision.
Hmm.
And
You gotta wonder, though, that Sony's probably like, "Look, you know, your game's delayed, but we're not gonna keep giving you money. We're not gonna keep funneling money into your studio. You gotta figure something out."
sorry, and there was a piece of clarification here that we missed ourselves, where he said that, to clarify an earlier point, health insurance lasts until severance ends. Other benefits end today, so they will have a
Okay,
little bit
that's
more
good.
than. Yeah, it's not so bad. I mean, it's still bad, but it's not great. Um, so then there was one other piece I wanted to pull from him, which was, this was the other bit that was rough, right? Um, More from other sources, he added. Many Bungie employees that were fired found out in the morning when they were locked out of services, logins, and email access was revoked. Others who instead found out in meetings were told not to tell team members themselves, as teams would be told, quote unquote, by other means. Many employees were unable to say goodbye or exchange contacts. Many team managers were not told at all about who on their team was being laid off and only found out as it happened. And then Paul added in a follow up tweet, bit of editorializing. Layoffs are always extremely difficult, but the way this was handled is a real source of anger. And yeah, I mean, I obviously agree. And I mean, you
Mhm.
talked about the billion plus dollar fund that they had, the 1.2 fund. We had a tweet from Rick Godwin, who's narrative designer at Act Zero Games, and he like had a thread about this where he was clearly incensed about this, and you can see plenty of other developers talking about that. This is just a clear example of corporate greed, putting money over people in a situation where they really didn't have to. They had money set aside for this, and they decided to do this, and then also handle it in a really inhuman way, which is
Yeah, I mean,
tough,
there's some
man.
there's some more context coming out, as we've been recording. Jason Schreier put up a new post over on Bloomberg.
8%. Oh my god, 8% of their staff.
Yeah, they missed revenue targets by 45%. Some cut
Wow.
roles are being outsourced. The Final Shape, which is their new DLC, is getting good, not great feedback, and is being delayed for improvement. And there's weak player retention after Lightfall. You got no content for them, and you just delayed the next big DLC. Why are your people going to keep playing your game? And Paul said, I don't know how you turn around a 45% revenue miss anytime remotely soon in the current climate. It's seriously concerning. You don't monetize your way out of it. You have to bring players back, plain and simple. Currently, it's an incredibly tall order. Will be further attrition after a final shape delay. This is a wider Sony problem. The gas bet and investments in VR and the Xbox fight and all the rest. Bungie chose these cuts and how to do them badly, but Sony is facing clear headwinds. Spider-Man and PS5 sales aside, there are larger issues going on here.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah, man. I mean, I think this is the latest in a long line of decisions that they've made that we've questioned, and it's like it's all coming to roost because these have been stupid decisions that they have invested way too much time and money and effort into. They spent way too much money on Bungie. They spent way too much money trying to fight a court case they knew they weren't going to win, and we knew Jim Ryan was part of that. So it's like this could all be why he got the axe, man, because it's like, what the fuck are you doing?
you really think he got the axe then? Because I thought that
I
when we
don't
spoke
know. I
about it
don't
a
know.
few weeks ago.
I I could see it either way. I think it's more likely he got the axe and then he chose to leave. I think. But
Yeah. Either
the more
way,
you see about
it's
this, it's like,
really not a great look. The
no,
more
it's a
you kind of
terrible
zoom
fucking
out,
look.
the more you zoom out, the more you see that there's layoffs at multiple Sony studios, the more you see that PSVR 2 was a complete failure, and the 45% miss on revenue here
On a
is
company
just.
you just spent $3 billion acquiring.
But that always seemed like just a reaction to Microsoft buying Bethesda. It
Yeah,
always
but
seemed
again,
like
it's like what a stupid reaction to be like, "Oh no, they bought one of the biggest publishers in the industry. Let's buy Bungie." Okay. I'm sorry. How much did Microsoft spend on Bethesda?
it
What was
was
it?
like 16 billion, wasn't it?
No, it was like 7, wasn't it? 7 or 8?
No, it wasn't.
Look it up for me.
Yeah, it would have.
So,
7.5 billion. Yeah, you're right. So
7.5, like I said.
it was half of
So
but Bungie was
so
half of that.
so if you are keeping score at home for the low price of $7.5 billion, Xbox acquired Doom and Wolfenstein and Fallout and Elder Scrolls and Starfield and uh who else we got? You rattle some Dishonored. We got
Got Redfall, it was really good.
sure.
Starfield,
Can't
all
all
of
be
the
winners. Can't all be winners. But
you
they
got
got
Machine Games, they just put out, like, They just put out Hi-Fi Rush. There was, like, some real hits in the pipeline.
And again, we've had pudding from that, right? We got Pentiment, we got, a bunch of these small games on Game Pass, and we got their entire library of IP, right? And all of the games from those series. So really, really great retro library added to Game Pass too, right? So pretty big boon for them. Really, really big win for Xbox. And Sony's response to that is let's spend half that to acquire Bungie, who owns Destiny, which just missed its sales targets by 45%, and Marathon. Money well spent. Oh, and then we'll lay off 8% of the talent that we just spent all that money acquiring. What a good use of our funds.
Yeah, it's really not good. Just to clarify though, Pentiment's by Obsidian, so we didn't get that one out of ZeniMax.
You're right.
That was
Excuse
Obsidian.
me.
But
Excuse me. You're
but
right.
regardless though, it does make the deal look really, really bad, and I don't know how they kind of claw back from here. At some point, Sony's gonna have to step in and be like, "What's going on? Like, seriously, what is happening there? When are we gonna get these games? Why have you missed revenue targets by 45%? How are you gonna get out of this hole? Or are we just gonna have to kind of break you up and put you into other Sony studios
I think there's a very, very, very high likelihood that Sony ends up closing down Bungie
or
at some
selling
point
them?
or selling
Flog
them.
them to Xbox for 1 billion.
But I don't see this getting better. I really don't. I see it getting worse.
Yeah. You know, that do you remember the thing as part of the deal as well that Bungie could keep self-publishing games, and that they were gonna use it as like a mark to publish games on other platforms? They never published anything else within this period, in the 15-month
Not
period
yet.
that they've owned it. I just thought they would have though.
None of these
Like,
games are ready. That's the problem.
yeah, man, it is a mess, absolute mess.
We'll see what happens. We'll leave it there for today. So we've got some more stuff to talk about in the back half of the show. We're going to jump into the question block in just a second here. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of October. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Pilkey, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for joining us. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/. I lost my rhythm on this one, gang. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm just going to pick that one back up. Thank you so much for your support, everybody. Y'all are the realest of the real. Thank you for your support on patreon.com/flipscreengames. We greatly appreciate your supporting the show. And of course, if you guys want to go and show your support like they did, if you want to get involved in a bunch of the free ways that you can do so, like writing into the show, keeping the conversation rolling week to week between episodes over on Discord, or just checking out some of the other work that we do, head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can find links to all the places we are all over the web. However, you choose to get involved, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Flip Screen Games podcast and for bearing with me while my brain just shuts down because I've recorded a lot of podcasts today. So let's jump into the question block, Steve. We're gonna get off PlayStation. We're gonna throw some shit at Xbox. How's that sound?
My favorite thing to do, you know, and I'm sure it's your favorite thing to do wearing a PlayStation hoodie. You just absolutely love to shit on Xbox all day long.
I know what you're talking about. The lights changed. I'm an Xbot now. Okay. Actually, so originally I was gonna wear my Xbox shirt underneath this and like pull it off when it
Would have
was,
been good.
but I couldn't find it. The only other Xbox thing I have is another sweatshirt, and I was like, that's a level of commitment to the bit that I just can't abide by today. So rocking Xbox green in the background to throw our lumps at Xbox. So, uh, Microsoft has made some headlines this week because they have issued a system level ban for what they are calling quote unquote unauthorized Xbox accessories. So that has been making a lot of waves because, I think for a lot of the obvious stuff that you're thinking of, right? Like the third party controllers that you get from a company like Power A or something like that, right? Or 8-bit
Well, my
dough,
Mad Cats, you know, I had them back in
Mad
the
Cat.
day. Loved my Mad Cats controller.
They're all fine. Don't worry about it. None of those controllers are affected. It's not a problem, right? The intent here is to crack down on cheating devices. There are a bunch of like features that like they take advantage of things like auto aim or like give people like the aim assist that you would get with a controller, but they use it with a mouse and keyboard. So it's just all these things that are, you know, just cheating methods that exist to um, you know, like take advantage of systems and make the games less fun and less competitive and they're violating terms and services, right? So the effort is to crack down on that. However, there has been this kind of unintentional side effect of impacting a bunch of enthusiast devices that exist in the accessibility community and the fighting game community. There's been an outcry from a bunch of those folks because there are a ton of these devices that are used for like again, right? Obviously for accessibility, but when it comes to the fighting game community that are used in tournament settings. And there have been people like Maximilian Dude, who's a fighting game player on YouTube, who's saying that like this could effectively kill playing some of these games on Xbox because it will fundamentally change their ability to, you know, um, properly compete.
Yeah, I mean, and friend of the show, Sightless Combat, wrote over on Reddit that the ban on third-party accessories would make it impossible for them to use adapters to play mainstream games with sighted assistance when accessibility in-game isn't there. Unfortunately, forcing any and all accessibility users to use their own accessibility option is by definition not accessibility if it doesn't meet a person's needs. I think that there will be workarounds for accessibility stuff. I think probably we'll see Microsoft reach out to people like Sightless Combat, like other users that were talking about it over on Reddit, and see what can be done. They've obviously got their own official Xbox adaptive controller for accessibility purposes, and it definitely seems like this is focused on trying to kind of hone in on cheaters using devices like a Titan or a Cronus that do have like legitimate uses. You might want to map buttons, or you might want to have macros so you can press one button and it does two button clicks, things like that. But people use those for cheating. There was an article over on Ars Technica back in 2021 about the Titan 2 being used with a capture card and some software that would look at the video feed coming through the capture card, figure out where it needs to aim, run that back through the Titan device, which just emulates a mouse and keyboard or emulates a controller, and you could just automatically aim. Like all you had to do was pull the trigger, and it would just shoot the other person in the game, which completely ruins an online multiplayer experience for people.
Yeah, it's just miserable. It's like what are we doing? Like I really just wish that people would not do crap like this. And it's like I totally understand the desire to like, it's like you're a tinkerer, right? Sometimes you do stuff just to see if you can do it, but like putting these on the market and selling them and it's just like, come on, man. Like, that this is not a cool thing to do.
And
Nobody
like I
nobody
would want
wants
to
to play
use
with
it
a cheater.
I'd wanna use it for the actual functionality though, because it is stuff I use Steam input for over on the Steam Deck, where I will map buttons to do 2 things, or you can map it to do, like, turbo, or I might wanna remap the top buttons to the back buttons, and you can do that with, like, an Elite controller, but if I wanna remap the actual controller, I don't wanna have to do it on a per game basis or at the system level, I can do that in something like a Titan. It's got multiple modes, and I can flick through them to kind of switch between it. That's what the intention was for those devices, but people do use them for cheating, which sucks.
Yeah. And I think that like you said, I think that there's probably ways to figure this out. I think when it comes to the accessibility devices or the fighting game devices that they're talking about, I imagine that there's probably like an understanding that can be reached with those companies where they can just officially join the partner program at some capacity and then, they'll be okay. Because that's basically just how it works, right? Like the way that like this story I think at least came across my purview. I saw a lot of people sharing this was a tweet from Wario 64 that was pulling an article from Windows Central that was breaking the whole thing down. And if you do connect one of these accessories, basically what's going to happen is it's going to be from November 12th on is going to be when this starts. When you plug it in, you'll be given I think it's 2 weeks before the device will then be permanently blocked and you'll not be able to use it. So I guess the understanding there is supposed to be like if you bought a controller that is,
You can send it back, yeah.
yeah. Or you can use it until you get a new controller, right? You're not like locked out that day and now you're, up shit's creek or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but you
I
actually
wonder how
will
many people have fake controllers and don't realize until this notice come up.
more than you think, I bet. I bet you that's going to be a problem. Um, so in Wario's tweet, right, and this is like summarizing from the Windows Central article, which we'll link to down below. Um, According to sources, Microsoft plans to expand its program for approved third-party wireless Xbox controllers. So it sounds like that's probably the intent, right? Is they're gonna implement this to try and limit cheaters and any of the folks that are selling a legitimate product that just haven't gone through the process of becoming a partner, either because you couldn't easily do it or it wasn't a thing where they were accepting people to just apply or whatever like that. If they set up a system like that where if you're selling a legitimate product that benefits users and it's not used for cheating and it's not, limiting, other people's experience by you using it, then I don't see why they would. Especially for accessibility stuff, I don't see there's any universe where they get in the way of that stuff being used.
Yeah, I don't think that's their intention. Their intention definitely here seems to be on cheaters. I don't think they probably make much money from the Design for Xbox program. There probably is some kind of small licensing fee, but it's not really kind of where they're making the big bucks. I think they're just charging people to license the logo. So on like the 8-bit Xbox controller, they can have the Xbox button on there, for example, rather than
Yeah.
it being like a generic version.
And like the official face buttons
Yeah.
and everything. Yeah, I think you're
So
probably right.
I'm sure we'll hear more about it in the coming weeks as that kind of deadline approaches. I think it's the end of November that they're kind of cutting off and saying moving forwards that you've got to get official controllers or whatever it is. Um, but I'm not concerned about it. I have faith that the team over at Xbox will figure out the accessibility side of things.
Yeah, I think so, and hopefully the fighting game stuff too, because obviously, like I'm more concerned about
Mango made a good point though. Like, what tournaments using an Xbox?
that's.
Like it was like you're using a PC or a
I mean,
PlayStation or maybe a Switch.
Killer Instinct is an
Yeah, I guess
Xbox
that's probably
fighter,
the only
yeah,
thing.
and that's definitely got a dedicated community that still competes. So that's definitely one. There's probably other multi-plat ones that maybe they use, but I do feel like you're generally right that I think PlayStation is kind of the de facto
Mhm.
console for a lot of that stuff.
I
But
don't know what the situation is over on PlayStation. Can you use these devices over there? I would imagine not.
I mean, I opened up the website that Maximilian was talking about, and there are PlayStation accessories. So seemingly, yes.
Okay. Maybe we'll see Sony follow suit here.
See. All right. So last question of the day. It is as of recording right now, Halloween. So we're still knee deep in the spooky season. And Trendy Brendy wrote in with a very thematically appropriate question. Have y'all been playing any Halloweeny games, or have you just been so busy with all of these current releases? I just finished Detention by Red Candle Games. I've started this game every year for Halloween and have just noped out every time. And I'm glad I finally stuck with it this year because what a story. Yeah, I have definitely been too wrapped up in the current releases, Brendy. I will say, Spider-Man 2, it's flirted with some horror
The
moments.
spiders, isn't it? That's I knew it. I
Very
knew it was the
spooky, very
spiders.
spooky. That there's moments in it that were darker and scarier than I thought they would be, and it's not like horror game level, but like I was like, all right, this feels appropriate. It feels like I'm in the mood for it for the holiday season. But yeah, what about you? You been playing any horror games?
Yes, I had some friends come over on Saturday. We did a bit of a horror night then. We played the new First to Fathom, which if you remember from last year, the First to Fathom series was on my list of some of my favorite games I played that year. Episode 4 got released for Halloween. And this is the series that takes real, quote unquote, real stories from people that have written on them on Reddit or sent them in to the developer and turns that story into real life. So this story seems to be about a guy. We haven't finished the game yet. We're gonna kind of do round two on it. About a guy who got a job as like a fire watch in the woods, and spooky shit happened. There seems to be like some voodoo stuff involved. So I'm looking forward to finding out more about that. And then there was a game called Don't Scream that we tried, which is an early access game over on Steam, which is called like an Unreal Engine 5 short horror experience. Um, doesn't run great on Steam Deck at the moment. I can't imagine it ever will because it's not very optimized. But it's such a cool concept that you kind of just walk around and you've got to survive 18 minutes by not screaming or not making a very loud noise or gasping. You tweak the microphone and you tweak it so that it can hear anything louder than like softly spoken words in the room. And then if you scream, you die, and that's the end of the game. You've kind of got to run again.
I
So
love that. That's great.
spooky shit happens, people run at you, things go around. If you just gasp too loud, it will set off the microphone. So that was a good time. We had some good fun playing that. And I
Yeah.
also watched the Five Nights at Freddy's movie when that released,
What did you
and
think?
it's terrible, absolutely terrible.
Oh.
Do not bother.
So it's so funny because I haven't seen it yet. I don't know that I will. Maybe at some point, but certainly not in theaters. Because like I don't have any attachment to the IP or anything like that, you know? And like when I saw
I
that
don't
they
massively like. I've played some of them,
I played the
and I
original.
wanted to. And I really liked Megan, which is the previous movie that this, production house had put out.
Yeah,
So I was looking forward to watching this.
sure.
Blumhouse.
It was Blumhouse, and
Mhm.
Blumhouse is great, right? Like they've made tons of really, really high quality horror movies. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because I think when you look at the reaction to it, it seems to be pretty squarely that like the critical reception is very low and the fan reception is pretty high. It has a 28 on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and an 89 from the audience. So I
I
think
would sway to the 28. It's not great.
I think I saw what's his name? I forget his first name, but what's his name? Blum, the creator of Blumhouse. Uh he
Jason, I think
said
his name, Jason Blum.
Jason Blum, you're right. Yeah, and he said, "It was really important that we get it right for the fans. I'm glad that the fans are liking it. That's what's important." Also, it was their biggest opening at the box office ever, so they're pretty happy with its performance, I would imagine, even if, it's not necessarily for folks that are not diehards of the series. So your mileage may vary on that one, but some people seem to like it. So I don't know. If you've got like a younger sibling or something that like really loves Five Nights at Freddy's, if you are the younger person that really loves Five Nights at Freddy's, then maybe it's for you. But I'm not surprised to hear you say that you don't like it.
No, yes, really not good film. Really, really not good film.
Without
Uh,
spoiling anything, what about it didn't you like? Was it just like
Too
not
generic. Did not
okay?
hone in enough on Five Nights at Freddy's. Wasn't You didn't learn enough about the characters. There was some nice homages to other horror movies, like Scream, for example. Like one of the characters in the movie you kind of meet early on, plays Dewey in the original Scream movie. So it was nice to kind of see him, and he kind of had like a bit of a throw. It was like a kind of Easter egg for people who are real fans of the Scream movies, which I love. Um, but yeah, it's not one of their best. I also watched The Exorcist Believer, which Blumhouse also put out this year, and that was also not very good. So
Yeah,
they're
that
kind of
one did not do well at the box office and was not
yeah.
super well received. So that's tough. But
My next one I want to watch, Thanksgiving. Looks really fun. I'm looking forward to seeing that one. That comes out on Thanksgiving, weirdly enough.
yeah, fair enough. Well, there we go. Well, happy Halloween, everybody. I hope you had a good time. I would love to see your costumes over on the Discord if you want to go post them in general. If you got anything good, especially those of you with kids, show me the cute family costumes. Big sucker for those.
Yeah, I saw Max dressed up as Luigi
Press
for Halloween.
Luigi was very.
Yeah.
There's a shot of him playing the game. It was very funny. It's very good. You should post it on the Discord. And now that I've revealed my mustache, I can finally share the photo of me and Sarah when is Bob and Linda from Bob's Burgers, and we nailed it. Very good.
Oh, nice. Yeah, okay, that's
Very
cool.
good. All right. So we're going to wrap it up there for the day. Thank you guys for joining us on another Flip Screen Games podcast. Remember, if you want to write in with your thoughts on what's going on at PlayStation or anything else we've talked about on this or any other episode, bunch of ways you can get involved. Flipscreen.games is the website. You can show your support on Patreon and become a Patreon producer, get all kinds of extra perks and goodies, extra content, all that good stuff. You can, of course, go and join the Discord. You can write into us for the question block for next week's show. However you choose to get involved, flipscreen.games is the destination. And we thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Flip Screen Games podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.